Hello and welcome to Unstress. My name is Dr Ron Ehrlich. If you are a regular listener of this podcast, you must know breathing well is important. I identify breathe as one of the 5 pillars: sleep, breathe, nourish, movement and thought, as a framework for building resilience. The secret to living a longer life is to keep breathing for as long as you can. Okay, no big deal. But the secret to living a healthier life, physically, mentally, emotionally, is to breathe well and to use the breath consciously, which can really improve a lot. My guest today is Niraj Naik, known internationally as the Renegade Pharmacist. I'm going to let him tell that story. But my conversation with him covered a broad range of questions, and listen out for 2 questions he asks of everybody, which I think are quite powerful, about having to do something or about wanting to do something. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this conversation I had with Niraj Naik. Welcome to the show, Niraj.
Hi, Ron. Glad to be here.
Niraj, you've embarked on a journey of profound self-healing. I mean, education in yoga and holistic health. You face some health challenges yourself. You're a pharmacist. You're a musician. Can you share with our listener what got you to this point where you are now described as a renegade pharmacist? You'll have to define that one for us. And who or what has been key drivers on that journey?
Certainly. Well, that's right. I'm now kind of known around the world as the Renegade Pharmacist, but I was actually a real qualified community pharmacist working in the community in the UK. And that's where I got my big insight into the healthcare system in the UK and how it's not really serving the public anymore in the way it was maybe originally intended to. So what happened was I was really on like a search to help my patients get better. And like, I just witnessed so many people going away with like shopping bags full of drugs every month that it was just incredibly depressing. So what happened was I had, if you ever seen the movie The Shawshank Redemption, where the guy escapes from jail, right? And he's like kind of falsely imprisoned and all of that stuff.
Yeah, great movie.
And it's got a pretty dramatic ending. Yeah, well, I wrote this article that summed up how I managed to escape the corporate world which I was in, which was, I called it the Walmart redemption, because it was really like, that's where I really just witnessed what was going on in the corporate world. I happened to climb all the way up the top of Walmart, who own Asda in the UK. I was like working in their head office, the corporate head office. And I came up with this novel concept of giving shopping lists for patients who are on various health conditions. It's now we know so much about diet and nutrition and things like that. But back then, we're talking 2010, it was still quite underground kind of knowledge, like people really in the mainstream still didn't really understand like how the impact of food and diet on things like diabetes and things like that. And by simply changing people's diet, by giving them healthy shopping lists, I had amazing results with getting people off long-term medications, even for things like high blood pressure, even like people who had inflammatory issues as well, like arthritis. So that really opened my mind to the power of diet and nutrition and things like that. But what happened was I was about to launch this product, this service, and they all called like this meeting, and it seemed that they had done some kind of research on whether, what if the stuff that I say and teach, if it becomes too popular, what it would do to their potential sales of things that are, incredibly high profit. So that basically meant that the whole idea got shelved, and I became incredibly disillusioned with a whole system. And I was a pharmacist, and I did my best to try and get out of that situation of being in a pharmacy, because I just felt like I wasn't in the right place, like for healthcare. Like,
you were going to do this shopping list within the corporate structure to revolutionise Asda or Walmart. Are they the same? They're the same, are they?
Yeah, Walmart owns Asda. Yeah.
Okay, and you would have revolutionised all of Asda and Walmart's patients, clients' health. Go on.
Could have been, yeah, it could have been amazing. But then it didn't work out that way. And I actually, at this point, got hit like a lightning bolt with a chronic illness that left me housebound for nearly a year. And I literally went into mad depression, and I lost like 3 stone in weight. I don't know what, I mean.
It's probably...
is that the same in Sydney?
Yeah, no, we use kilograms, but 3 stone, well, that's... 14 times 3 is, anyway, 42 pounds. It's about 20 kilos. Just quick maths there.
So I was really sick. And I literally got given 2 options by the doctor. You either take this new drug that hasn't been tested yet, or you can have your colon removed by surgery. Because I had a condition called ulcerative colitis where you get ulcers in your colon. And I was basically crapping blood like 40 times a day. It was horrible.
Wow.
And and that was it. And then like luckily, a very close friend of our family now, Swami Ambikalanda, she came to the rescue. She's a yoga teacher in the UK. And she basically said to me, look, you've got a gift. Like if you can heal yourself now without the drugs, because all the drugs have stopped working, I was getting side effects. And she said, you'd be an amazing example to other people. And now's time for you, a chance to put the advice you've been giving to other people back onto yourself. And that really got me out of this mindset of depression. Like I was very depressed, and I was also very alone. Like being like a renegade pharmacist, that was actually one of the words they said, that your idea was too renegade. That was kind of where the renegade pharmacist name started to appear. Basically, I was alone. My friends, like my family, they all thought I was nuts. They thought I was mad, like talking about health and curing people and all this stuff. And a lot of our friends of our family and stuff were doctors in India, like Indian parents, like they tend to encourage kids to get into like medical professions. And so there's a lot of like medical people in my kind of extended family, and they all just thought I was crazy, and they all told me just shut up and take the pills. But I really, really, really couldn't like anymore. They just weren't working. And luckily, like I chose the third path, which was going into these ancient protocols of yoga, meditation, breathwork, pranayama, Ayurveda, and boom. Within a few months, actually within a few weeks, I was really much better. And then within a few months, I was like literally back to normal again. So that's when I put all my knowledge into like a system and a website called the Renegade Pharmacist. And I went really deep back into music. I found a whole new community. The community really became like the cure for me, like finding people who were like-minded and creating a whole new friend circle, like an extended family that was literally like people where I felt safe and comfortable. It's amazing how many people get sick because of the environment they surround themselves with, or fate has surrounded themselves with. Yeah.
I'm sure you're aware of the Harvard study, which was going over 75 years and looking at what's the biggest driver of, what's the biggest predictor of health and longevity, and they found relationships were the key.
Yes.
But listen, let's just back up because you've mentioned a few things there, and I wanted to ask you about a few of those things. Because on this show, we've talked a lot about, and in my book also, about breathing. It's a theme I like to share, and that there's a big difference between just breathing and breathing well, or even using breath constructively. It's also part of what you do. What are some of the benefits of and the science behind breath work?
Okay, yeah. So part of my cure was discovering pranayama. And pranayama is an ancient Indian science of breath work. It's nobody even really knows like how old, where it comes from. Even it's around the time of like yoga, but yoga as well. Nobody really knows like its true origins. But there is a ancient book called the Rig Veda. which is actually one of the most oldest manuscripts, religious manuscripts. And in there is a legend, a story of Soma. Soma is this psychedelic ritual that the rishis, the ancient Indian, nobody even knows where they're really from, but it's around the Indus Valley region. They were living in the golden age of the planet. So people lived for much longer periods of time. They were living in abundance, in harmony with nature, and they loved the Soma. The Soma gave them the ultimate bliss, and it would allow them to communicate with the gods. But however, what happened was over time, these populations grow. People start to explore different parts of the world. And in doing so, they start moving into lands where the Soma runs out. So everyone starts freaking out because they're so hooked on the Soma for their bliss and their happiness that one of the gods, Indra, so everyone was like considered a god at this time. The god Indra orders everyone to go inwards to discover how to create the Soma within. And this becomes the origins of Tantra. Tantra, yoga, pranayama, Ayurveda, meditation, all of these things come from the man's quest to create the Soma within. And what they discovered was that it was the breath. The breath was the direct way for us to consciously control the autonomic nervous system. Okay, because breath is the one thing that runs on autopilot. Okay, but it's also the thing that we can control consciously. So having conscious control over the breath, okay, allows us to tap in and alter the physiology, okay? And this is where we start looking at the science of what breath does in the body. So what they discovered was that in the quest of creating the Soma within, let's say the Soma is the DMT, the tryptamine, serotonin, dopamine, all of these feel-good hormones and psychedelic hormones are associated with the whole ecstatic experience, right, which is what people were looking for. In order to create that same effect, okay, it requires a certain process, which you can get through the breath. And actually, if you have looked at things like holotropic breath work and rebirthing, that process, actually, the idea of it is to get you into these ecstatic states where you literally create almost like a near-death experience, and you create the DMT spirit kind of molecule within. And originally what happened was because they were so hooked on the Soma, they just went into breath, and breath work became a very connected part of these ancient kind of tribes and cultures. And they then started to combine breath with like other things like rhythmic music and other like guided meditations and things to enhance the process. And then they would use like certain psychedelic concoctions with it, and that was the early shamanic traditions, using breath to reach the ecstatic states. Okay, in doing so, what they discovered was that actually we already contain every single substance and drug and medicine that we need already in the body. So through the same process, if you alter it and change it, you can actually change the different molecules and hormones that are created by the endocrine system. So the endocrine system, you could say, is like the chakra system. Okay, so the
like the chakra system.
Yeah, it's like a map of the endocrine system. Mm-hmm. The endocrine system creates hormones, which affects our feelings, emotions, and processes in the body. So what they discovered was actually we have an inner pharmacy, and just through breath and understanding different breathing techniques, we can actually alter and wake up the inner pharmacy. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then like what happened was then they discovered as well that breath can be used as a way to really strengthen the whole physical body. So if you imagine what happened was people started to migrate out, and they used to go into extremely harsh climates. So you could imagine like Russia or Tibet, all these like areas like outside of the Indus Valley. As you go further north, you're going into extreme harsh terrain. And up there, you'll see that, like in Nepal, there are, up until today, one of the strongest armies in the world. Well, if probably not, it's probably the strongest army in the world, is the Nepalese Gurkha army. And they actually train at very high altitudes where oxygen is very low. So actually, if you imagine like religion evolved through breath work, through psychedelic experiences and ecstatic experiences, and it was like a system of knowledge being passed down of how to live your life. So what they would do is they would study and they would look at things that were going out in nature and other people who had moved to certain areas and what they were doing, what was it about them, and they really studied them like we do now, like biohacking is all about self-inquiry and self-study. These were the first early biohackers, and they like the Nepalese have really preserved some of these traditions of training at high altitude. And this Himalayan ancient yoga, this tantric yoga, the Himalayas, really preserves this almost superhuman ability that you can create through learning about breath and training at high altitude. Okay, so you want to know a lot about the science?
Go for it, because it is intriguing, isn't it? I mean, we look at people living in these extreme climates, and the fact that humans have migrated to them is a tribute to our resilience. But this was all before heating, and I'm not even sure they have heating up there at the moment. So you kind of think to yourself, how do they do it? And we in our cities kind of think, oh, we're so protected, we're so coddled. They're superhuman. Okay, let's hear a bit about the science.
Okay, awesome. So what's going on? The further you go up north and up into these mountains, is the oxygen levels rapidly go down. So you go when you're at the higher altitude has like the top of Mount Everest has like 10% of the oxygen that is in normal atmosphere. All right.
Yep.
So what they discovered was actually that oxygen, okay, when it's reduced in the body for brief periods of time, okay, it would create a positive adaptive response in the body to having less oxygen. Okay. Now, why is this important? There's a reason for this. So oxygen, okay, is part of the respiratory process producing energy. So oxygen goes in to the mitochondria, which are like the furnaces, the energy packs of the cell. So it's like the furnace. Imagine fire, where you blow air onto it, right? You need a certain amount of air for the fire to burn. Too much air, okay, too much oxygen, the fire burns too bright, and it actually will spread too far and cause damage. And that's like the Californian wildfires, right? Too little oxygen, the fire doesn't burn at all. So you need the right balance of oxygen. That's pranayama. Now, here's the thing. The chemical reactions that goes on during metabolism in the mitochondria results in some byproducts. These are free radicals, oxidative reactive species. Now, what that does is, if too much of that, it actually causes damage to the DNA of the cells and causes the cell to prematurely age and die, shortens the telomeres, right? So imagine what they were trying to do, and what they realized was if you can become very, very efficient at using as little oxygen as possible, right? So using oxygen. So if you become super efficient oxygen burner, it would mean you produce less damage in the body. You become more efficient with energy. You run more efficiently. You live longer. Yes. So the whole goal of yoga and pranayama was to breathe less. And the less you need to breathe, the longer you live. They say in yoga that you only live a certain number of breaths.
Right.
Okay.
And
that's now it makes sense, like why they say that. All right. And what happened was, so Russian scientists, like actually in more recent times, the 70s, they were very competitive. They were trying to make their athletes like the strongest, the best. So what they realized, they observed that people who went up to high altitudes for short periods of time and came back down, they would actually have more strength, more endurance, more fitness, more stamina, right? And some people who had like certain disease conditions would report feeling better when they came back from a mountain, going up to the mountain. So they want to know what was going on. So they created this therapy called intermittent hypoxic training. And that involves using machines where you have a short amount of like 2 or 3 minutes of normal air, followed by 2 or 3 minutes of very low oxygen air. So like it's like you're going up to the mountain for a short period of time and then coming back down and then keep going up and then going back down. So it's like you're walking up and down a mountain, right? Imagine that. So it simulates that. And they found that this had amazing health benefits. Like the body made a positive adaptive response to having less oxygen for a short period of time. So the body would get everything in action into gear, and it would create more red blood cells. It would dilate blood vessels around the body. You get more blood flow to the heart, to the brain. You'd wake up dormant parts of the brain as well. And it would create heightened states of consciousness. It would make a stronger physical body. And this was all using machines and stuff. But what they then realized was that actually you can do this already if you just hold your breath for a few minutes a day. Mm-hmm. So that's literally what the yogis were doing. The yogis and pranayama, one of the most revered techniques of all, is breath retention, kumbhaka. Mm-hmm. And this actually means holding your breath, literally breath retention.
Yep.
So they created a process of using, it's called Rechaka Kumbhaka, where you can hold your breath in a certain way for a certain period of time, and it lowers the oxygen in your body below a blood saturation around 85%, and this triggers this positive stress response on the body. And this actually can create all the magical effects of these superhuman yogis and all these things that we have heard about in legend, is actually very, very real and something that you can actually use for yourself. Yeah.
Yes, look, there's music to our ears here, Niraj, because we've spoken about this kind of thing, and interesting to hear you reference mitochondria, because we've also done many shows of cancer as a metabolic disease, and this is very much about energy production and all of that. But this segues into another question I wanted to ask you, because we've talked about Vim HoF on this show and this whole idea of hormesis, intentional stress, and extreme wellness, and he's performed some extreme endurance feats in the cold, controlling his nervous system. And in fact, I think they've rewritten the textbook on the basis. And you've done workshops with him, you've worked with him. I mean, you've mentioned a bit of that. What have you learnt from this? Because pranayama and the holding of the breath and switching on of parasympathetic is something we've discussed before. But he has his own breathing technique. What are some of the things you've learned from him?
So Wim's a friend of mine. Like, we've done lots of music together. I produced all of the soundtrack to the Wim HoF method and did a lot of the music that's on the site. And I've even hosted his events as well. So he's a good buddy of mine. Mm-hmm. He's also completely one of the most crazy out there guys I've ever met in my life as well. Yes. Like, he's extreme all round.
He is.
But he really embodies the practice. So he is a full-on, superhuman yogi in the whole sense of the word. But there's also certain things so his method, he has created a method, is really useful for some cases, but it doesn't work for everyone. It can cause actually stress in some people who are overstressed. So I've gone more back personally into the traditional ways of doing this with what my Swami taught me, and then I also trained in Rishikesh with a doctor who uses these techniques to heal patients. And I wanted to be able to create a system for not just for health and fitness, but actually for reaching these ecstatic states of bliss. And I believe that actually this is the true purpose or original approach to yoga, was liberation. Okay, so free yourself from attachment from the past, and from the future. So enlightenment. This was the real goal of what yoga is. And I believe actually now that I've really got to understand the science of yoga, that actually we can use this, and the science actually really backs up, confirms what they were trying to tell you before. And that is, we are a product of our first 7 years of our life. Okay, the Essenes, actually, in the Jesuits said, you give me a child till he's 7, I'll show you the man. Because they knew that you get conditioned the most in those first 7 years of your life. And if you understand the science of yoga and how it works, it actually clears all of the imprinting from what's attached to your physical, like imprinted into you from a very, very young age. Like, it basically upgrades the hard disk, and it also upgrades the operating system. And when you combine it with all of the various practices that I've got in this program called Soma, then you really actually have a system of awakening. So awakening you up to your true self. It's like a form of like self-therapy, of getting rid of a lot of the old imprintings. And a lot of that actually, unless you shake that first imprinting, okay, your life doesn't change very often. Okay, so I wanted to reach like a whole big spectrum of people, who are not just people looking for peak performance and climbing up mountains and, that kind of stuff. I wanted to go for like people who are like, just like me, who are stuck in corporate world, like really lost, confused with the system, they were depressed. And I wanted to build a community of people who are very like-minded, who are into that stuff, because I know the community is the cure. So Soma's really become like a big movement. I was definitely, obviously spent a lot of time with Wim, and we share a lot of the same ideas. And the music for me is integral to this. So for me, it's not just focus on the health and fitness side.
Yep.
It's more about like, what does it really mean to be healthy? That's really what, you've got to ask yourself. What does it really mean to? And I believe it comes down to asking two questions to yourself. First one, every morning, if you ask yourself, am I truly wanting to get up and do a hard day's work, or am I doing this because I have to do it? If your answer is I have to do it, that's inevitably going to lead to a life of stress, chronic stress, and you're going to get sick. And then the other question you're going to ask is, am I truly wanting to be compassionate to other people, or am I doing it just because I have to be compassionate? And what my job is now is I've really realized this is a source of most people's problems, is not being able to clearly answer these questions. And so what I do is I help people answer those questions in the right way.
Well, look, I love that. I love that, that question between having to and wanting to. I mean, that's really very, very neat way of thinking about it. Can we just take a step back here? Because we've also, over the period of this show this year, spoken to one of my all-time heroes. I'm sure you know him, Bruce Lipton.
Oh, he's amazing.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he's awesome.
And he talks also about this important first 7 years. And, like you say, the Jesuits, show me the boy and I'll show you the man. And when we think about it, the first, I look at my grandchildren who are 3 to 4 months old and we remember things. I think about my first memory, and it probably goes back to 3, maybe 4, just scant memories. But there are those, if we're talking about the first 7 years of life and we're needing to explore those first 7 years of life to understand, what do we do about those first 1, 2, 3, 4 years where we have no conscious memory?
Yes. So this is where the higher yoga rituals were created. So the first imprinting that actually happens is when you're in the womb, where we have no control whatsoever. We are completely at the mercy of the environment outside of the womb and your mother's hormonal system, and her state of emotions. So this is where a lot of conditioning happens actually. So it's really important for if you have a wife who's pregnant, is to do your best to make sure that she is really comfortable and feeling safe and feeling secure and happy and things like that, because the stress that goes in here, it will shape the child and it's hard to know which way it's going to shape you. So that's where it firstly comes in. And then the second imprinting that happens is the moment you're born. So the moment you're born, you come out and they cut the umbilical cord. What happens is you take your first breath, Okay, so you take a breath in and you gasp for air because it's like it's the first breath you've ever taken. But because you're so used to having everything given to you, it's the first time you're also dependent on somebody else, right? For your support, for your survival. The first imprinting now of survival comes into your reptilian brain. So as you take a gasp, you just let go and you cry and cry and cry. And it's the exhale which people really find hard to do even now, because when you're chronically stressed, you hold on to your air. You basically breathe in and you gasp and you hold your breath in, all right? And when you hold your breath in, okay, certain things happen. So, and this is actually part, like with Wim, what he focuses a lot on is the retention in, holding in, right, the breath. And when you hold your breath in and squeeze, okay, what happens is you create a surge of adrenaline, all right? So actually, the Mula Bandha is what the yogis talked about as another way to tap into the autonomic nervous system. So the Mula Bandha is this part of the anatomy. It's located in the pelvic floor muscles, okay? And if you just squeeze your Mula Bandha, squeeze it, pull it up, like imagine you're holding onto the urine if you're really desperate for a pee, right? So you draw those muscles up, squeeze, okay, it's like you're sucking something up into your ass, okay, and then you hold your breath, right? If you do that and just squeeze as hard as you can, your heart rate starts to go up dramatically fast, okay, and you create a short burst of adrenaline. This short burst of adrenaline, it has this like anti-inflammatory effect on the body. It's almost like a reset switch for the body, okay. So this is a kumbhaka, is another type of kumbhaka where you hold your breath in and squeeze the Mula Bandha. Okay, it's actually one of the processes they use to wake up the kundalini, the sexual energy, okay, the life force. But that's another subject in itself.
Yep.
But this imprinting, okay, actually can cause chronic stress, but can use also in a positive way. So you can actually get over these first two imprintings by meditation techniques. So what happens is those two imprints, the survival, the urgency to breathe and hold on to your breath, is like actually all ingrained in the reptilian brain, which is the most primitive part of the brain. The next imprinting after that, which also occurs in the reptilian brain, is when you are getting breastfed by your mother. So the first imprinting with your mother. And that interaction actually can really have a big effect on things you seek for comfort if you're very much somebody who needs a lot of comfort. So cigarettes actually get imprinted. The habit of cigarettes gets imprinted at this point as well. So this mother-child relationship is super important. If you're not comforted enough as a baby, it can lead to all of these like feelings of not enough, not worthy, abandonment, fear of rejection, all this stuff that plays out later on in life. So what they discovered was these higher yoga rituals of clearing these out. So one of them actually is to go into darkness. So I went into darkness for 7 days, 7 nights. Okay. It was the most insane thing I've ever done in my life. We did very powerful tantric rituals, meditation practices, yoga. It's kind of shamanic yoga because it comes from a Tibetan tradition. And what happened was actually just before I was going in to the darkness, like the ulcerative colitis came back the first time ever. I literally shat myself, okay, with fear. I was literally going to the toilet again like 10, 20 times, and I had to go into the dark where you can't even find the toilet. Like you have to use rope and like padded paper to try and find the toilet. Now suddenly I'm going to the toilet like 20 times a day in pitch blackness. It was insane. And
were you sharing this room with other people, Niraj?
Niraj?
Yeah. Okay, but go on.
Horrible.
It sounds it.
But it was wild. So what happened was, what I discovered was in doing this, because then I surrendered to the darkness, and a lot of like magical stuff happened. Was I realized actually the darkness, what it symbolizes is you're going back into the womb. So whatever big fears and traumas occurred in the womb, okay, a period of darkness, okay, actually comes up to surface. And it's your chance then to karmically frame that trauma into something positive. So what happened was I did a lot of like special trauma release exercises, and I did a lot of breath work. The Soma techniques that I do now, I teach now, were all about getting into these states in the darkness to just go so deep on this early imprinting in the womb. Because my mum was incredibly depressed and stressed and under a lot of fear when I was in the womb. Like her life was shit. And it imprinted a lot on me. And I had this crazy fear of the dark. Until I was like 7 years old or something, I had major fear of the dark. I couldn't sleep on my own. And all of these things now make sense. It's because of the imprinting that happened in the womb. And then it also makes sense why when I went into the dark, the disease came up, because ulcerative colitis is associated with fear. So because it came when I was under a lot of fear of going back to being a pharmacist, losing this thing that I worked on for so long, and then it came back again in the womb.
How long into this 7-day program you said you surrendered to the darkness? How long into the 7-day program did you surrender?
I think on day 3 I was first 2 days was like
that's
so
a long 2 or 3 days. I thought, look, after an hour or two I just surrendered to it. But
the first 2 days were insane, because it was really. And then when I surrendered, like a lot of the feeling of the illness I had that came back started to subside, and then literally it came out, and within a day or two I was back to normal again. The disease disappeared. It was the most bizarre thing ever. It was astonishing. It was like a ghost had appeared, manifested inside me, revealed itself in the dark, and then allowed me to forgive and reframe the past. Because a lot of this comes down to forgiveness and creating compassion and states of compassion and making peace with your situation, your past, your present, and whatever's happened in the future. And that's when you become liberated, when you have acceptance. Yeah, and this is what I like to teach. This is what I'm about. What my stuff's about.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating, and there's a lot of themes that we've kind of touched on before that you're bringing together here, which is nice. I think you've kind of. I was going to ask you about this idea of the inner pharmacy. Can you explain that one? I know you use this term discovering your inner pharmacy, and I think you've touched on some of that already, but just give it to our listener. Explain that one to our listener.
Sure. Okay. So we'll just go back to a little bit of science again. So what is a pharmacy? Pharmacy by definition is like where you're using a medicine, which is a drug, which is a concentration of a active ingredient that is something that goes into the body, and it changes the biochemical processes that leads to a change in a disease state. That's the point of medicine, is to reduce the symptoms of diseases through chemicals. Yep. So now this is deeply flawed, because medicines, like drugs, they're not intelligent. They don't have an innate intelligence. So because they're taken away from their natural environment, which is the plant, and they're concentrated and isolated. So they lead to crazy side effects, if you take them long term. They only should be used in emergencies. Now, the way drugs work, they usually work on one or two sides of the nervous system. So they either work on the parasympathetic side or the sympathetic side. The sympathetic side deals with fight or flight. The parasympathetic side deals with rest and digest. So if the sympathetic side is actually where we need it. We need a balance of the two. However, it's the one that's switched on too much in people. The olden days, the sympathetic side was really, really, really useful. So we're talking, the ancestral times when we were cavemen living in the jungle, right? Surrounded by lions, tigers, and bears, and other like warring tribes. So what happened was then when anything came at you, like any source of danger, like a lion or something, you need to spring quickly into instinctive action to defend yourself, or this thing's going to kill you, right? So you need to either fight or run away, Yep. And the sympathetic nervous system will kick into gear super fast so that you didn't have to even think about it. You just did it, right? So that's how fast you have to react. However, when you ran away or whatever, if you killed the animal, sooner or later, after the danger's gone, everything will be okay, and you come back, you calm down, you go back to normal. Whereas now, fast forward into our time, we don't live in the jungle anymore. However, we haven't really evolved much out of the jungle. We still live in a jungle. We live in the concrete jungle of the cities, okay? And now the lions, tigers, and bears are actually our boss, our relationships, our bills, deadlines, things that really, really, really like trigger us, okay, and make us feel stressed. However, this time, we can't just kill them. We can't run away from them. We have to deal with them. So we're constantly triggered by stress. That's the problem. And that means that we're wallowing in a sea of hormones of stress, cortisol, adrenaline, which causes vasoconstriction, causes all the blood pressure problems that lead to heart disease and all of this stuff. Now, the yogis understood this. So they understood actually that that we can actually switch on the parasympathetic nervous system if we know how to do it. We're not born with a manual instruction how to do it, okay? And we're told now by all scientists and doctors that we have no control over the autonomic nervous system. It just runs on autopilot. So they thought that the only way we can influence the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system is through drugs. Okay? That's what we've been educated into believing, is that we have to use machines or drugs or surgery to make us feel calm, right? So therefore, there's a $1 trillion business, a pharmaceutical business, that works on the parasympathetic nervous system. So they use sleeping pills to get you to sleep, okay? They use anti-anxiety pills, huge blockbuster drugs, to help you feel more calm and relaxed. And then they use blood pressure medication to bring your heart rate down, okay? Now, the yogis have known all along that actually we have conscious control over our involuntary functions, okay? And it's the breath that does it. The breath is our tool to tap in and switch on the parasympathetic nervous system at will. By doing so, we can change our brainwave state. We can change the heart rate. We can lower blood pressure. We can enhance the immune system. All of these things are possible. At the same time, we can also stimulate the sympathetic nervous system at will. As I just told you, if you just squeeze your ass up and hold on to your breath, you're going to raise your heart rate and you're going to raise your blood pressure. You're going to create a short burst of adrenaline. If you do this in a moment where you're really positive and not stressed and you're like super ecstatic, okay, by doing that, using the Mula Bandha in the right way, you create the same state of passion, the same state of peak performance flow as you would if you're like about to like win a competition or a game, where your sympathetic nervous system switched on, adrenaline's pumping, but instead of cortisol, you release DHEA. DHEA is a chemical that actually creates dilation. You get better blood flow, and it's associated with living longer, okay? So they knew that using various breath techniques and music and meditation and things like that in ritual forms, we could reach these ecstatic states by working with both the parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system, just the way psychedelic plants do. So psychedelic plants, they have been used shamanically and by ancient traditions, cultures for thousands of years, like, you know, and not many people know that the religion of India, or the Hindu religion, it all comes back down to psychedelics, exploration. And now we can actually emulate that through breath. And actually the word spiritual actually means to breathe. In Latin, spiritual actually means to breathe. Okay, espiritu means breath and life. So our root of the word spiritual is to breathe. And a lot of stuff happens, a lot of magic happens when we do things like breathe together. Okay, so breathing together actually in Latin means conspire. So conspire actually was a thing that people used to do. It's a conspire. They used to get together, breathe together. Because when you breathe together, okay, what happens, and HeartMath, amazing scientists have shown this, is that you create this state called coherence. If you breathe in the same rhythm together, all right, exactly the same rhythm. And actually instinctively, if you spend enough time with somebody, and even if you just look in someone's eyes in a conversation, your breath will match their breath very quickly. You'll model that. You'll see babies, they model the mother's breath very, very fast. So actually breathing together, what it does, it creates this harmony and bond and communion between the tribe, the group. And when you breathe together, what it also happens, if you breathe in a rhythm, rhythmic breathing, it creates this optimum blood flow from your heart to your brain, okay? this harmonization effect. So when you breathe in, you actually stimulate your sympathetic nervous system. When you breathe out, you stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system. So breathing in a perfect rhythm to a beat, okay, this rhythmic breathing, I call it breathing beats, okay. What it does is it creates this incredible magnetic expansion of your electromagnetic field that resonates, and it connects with other people, and what you're feeling starts to rub off on other people around you. It's really amazing.
And
so
this,
these are ways of creating altered states of consciousness.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I love that. The spiritual breath, conspiring, breathing together, coherence. I love, and that's great. Now listen, this kind of segues into another thing that I wanted to ask you about, because I know you've been a professional musician, and you use the power of music to heal. How does that work?
That's right. So one of the things that I really got deep back into was music, because music was something I was passionate about very, very young, and it was something actually that gave me a lot of joy, a lot of pleasure, a lot of way of escaping the bullying that was happening at school. Like I actually went and skipped like games like rugby. In Australia, you have rugby, right?
We do.
So I was never into it because I was really small, and I used to get a head kicked in every time I played it. So I used to bunk off and then go to the music room and just jam on keyboards. And suddenly I actually became quite the cool kid in the class, and from being the one that got picked on, because I figured out how to make music that was like the cool music, like the rave music at the time. And so then I started to run big events and gigs in my town. So I actually became a known kind of DJ in my local community. I ran one of the biggest raves actually in the UK for 3 years before I was a pharmacist. Then I became a pharmacist.
Sometimes those two go very nicely hand in hand, don't they?
Well, yes.
That's another topic for another...
That's a whole other topic. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a whole other topic. So actually, I then suppressed a lot of my passion for music when I became a pharmacist. I kind of gave up on it because I became depressed. And what happened was I felt that I wasn't exercising, and this is one of the reasons I got sick, was I wasn't exercising the right side of the brain. And one of the things I really teach now and really encourage people to do who are going through any kind of healing issue is to start exercising the part of the brain that you're not used to stimulating. Okay, so it doesn't always mean that it's the left brain, like that you've only been exercising. Some people, they're too floaty, they're too away with the fairies, they're not spending enough time being grounded and getting stuff done. So actually the system of Ayurveda is all about regaining balance of your whole energy body, your whole psyche, your whole spiritual outlook on life. And for me, one of the big things was to go back into music, because that was what my right side of the brain loved, but I'd become too left brain about it. And when I started to just make music that I loved, by emulating music that actually had helped me a lot. So I got really deep into meditation. And through doing that, I understood how the brain waves are altered by music, and how you can use certain brainwave technologies like binaural beats and isochronic tones actually to enhance the meditative process. And I use this as a hypnotherapeutic tool to go in there into my past life and re-engineer and reframe a lot of the stuff that caused me a lot of stress growing up as a child, and past conflicts and all these traumas that actually we all go through at some point, and some people is worse than others and has a negative effect on the body. The music I found suddenly had a deep, meaningful purpose suddenly, because before that, I was really disillusioned with the music industry. Actually, I became very close friends with the guy who managed a band called Muse. Muse are one of the biggest rock bands in the UK. And his company managed a lot of producers who produced bands like Coldplay and Radiohead and stuff like that. And he had become very disillusioned with the music industry as well, because it become like McDonald's music. It was just the same old drivel churned out, and there were no bands that represented music that had a message and a purpose, a spiritual purpose. Except for those early bands, things like Radiohead and Muse, they had a message. They had something to say. You know, they stood for something, like the Beatles, obviously, stuff like that, Pink Floyd. But a lot of that was missing, and it was when I really discovered how music can be used therapeutically that I became obsessed with making music again. And then I realized that actually rhythmic music that has a rhythm to it, okay, like especially the music that's around 120 beats per minute, or the actual the same groove of that is 60 beats per minute, okay, so it's half the tempo, is like the same as your resting heart rate, okay, beats per minute. So 60 beats per minute is usually your resting kind of like average healthy heart. And actually what they found was that they did a study, I can't remember exactly who it was, which university, but they did a study where they took all of the top hits, popular music songs from pop songs of the 80s and 90s and stuff, and they worked out what was the average tempo, and they found it was around 120 beats per minute. It was the average tempo of the most popular songs, the biggest hits. So that's weird, right? That 120 beats per minute. If you like, you can also count that as 60 beats per minute because it's half the tempo. So you'll still play in the same rhythm. Is the same as your resting heart rate. And this also corresponds perfectly to alpha brainwaves, low alpha brainwaves. Okay. And it's almost like this is the rhythm of life. This BPM, this tempo is the rhythm of life. So I started to experiment a lot with creating music at these tempos and using breath to mirror that and to work in sync with that. And that's how I came up with this breathing beats concept of breathing in a rhythm. And when you breathe in a rhythm, okay, like this, in this coherent, heart coherence way, over rhythmic music at this tempo, like absolute magic happens. That's what we've created with Soma. And we have like this really powerful musical process where you use breath work with rhythmic music combined with certain ways of doing breath retention and meditation and affirmation and visuals as well. You use certain like special visuals. You can get into these profound ecstatic states of mind where you get into such an altered state of consciousness, you can go in and reprogram the past and create a new reality. Yeah.
Well, I know that meditation, you know, we all know that meditation's a powerful tool we should all explore, and I'm sure it's on almost everybody's to-do list. But tell me, is this part of what you're using the term brainwave entrainment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So brainwave entrainment music, so meditation really what it means is the art of single focus, like focusing on doing one thing without any distractions. So you can be playing the guitar and get lost in just the playing the guitar, like where you're so present with every single note that you're playing that you cease to be tuned into any other source of information and awareness of anything else except for that thing that you're doing. That's the meditation. Okay, but then the meditation we're more used to is where you just try and still your thoughts and mind. Okay, but there's certain things that actually can help that, which is like music. So brainwave music can actually alter the brainwave frequencies, and actually these tiny pulses of sound are like rhythmic pulses that entrains your brain. It kind of tunes your brain to certain frequency states, and that actually can help like get you into even deeper meditative states where you just go so into altered states of consciousness and awareness that you go into very deep meditations. But forget about all of that stuff. The one thing that makes meditation the easiest of all is just breath. Just by following your breath and then knowing how to go into a breath retention of Rachaka Kumbhaka, holding your breath, of narrowing the lungs and dropping into absolute stillness where you relax every muscle in your body. Okay, that is the most profound meditation you'll get into, because life is just a series of inhales and exhales, all right? So when you press pause on your breath, you press pause on life, and that's when you drop into the stillest meditation. And that's it, and that's where the magic happens.
Listen, if you wanted to, we're coming to the end. This has been terrific. Covered so much territory here. If a person's just met you and you wanted to give them some advice about how to get started on their health journey, what would be the first couple of things you'd give us? A couple of tips that would get people started.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, obviously we talked about the first one, which is answering those questions, because actually everything depends on your answers to those questions. Because once you start working on creating more compassion in your life and looking towards changing that answer to, I want to do this 100% with absolute conviction, that's when everything changes. So, but beyond that, the greatest thing that has an effect over your physiology is your breath. So understanding that by becoming super efficient at using oxygen, right, will make you stronger, healthier, and happier. That's the goal. So you then would do everything. You would look at what are all the things that makes you more efficient use oxygen. That is breathing through your nose rather than your mouth. So you'll become more conscious at breathing through your nose. It's one of them. There's certain types of exercises, anaerobic exercise, which is what you find in yoga, true, Himalayan yoga from the Himalayas, which has a lot in common with the shamanic Tibetan yoga traditions and the Russian traditions, is anaerobic exercise. It means you're exercising to the point of exhaustion and you controlling your breath into each pose, each posture that you make. And it's all about becoming really efficient at using oxygen, okay? And then you'll start looking at things that you eat that influences how you breathe. So certain foods actually causes you to want to consume more oxygen. So you'd start to change that. So you start to change your diet. Things like sugar upsets your oxygen balance in your body, your physiology in your body. So you start to eliminate processed foods, because most natural healthy foods that are cooked by real human beings are not made in a factory. Mm-hmm. They're actually what we're supposed to eat, and you'll live a lot longer if you just switch to that. And you can go even deeper, but the Indians discovered a whole system of doing this. So everything, if you do it from a proper understanding of these subjects, Ayurveda, yoga, tantra, pranayama, all sciences of making you super efficient at using oxygen, so that you control your energy, because energy is life. We're all energy. Right, everything is energy. E equals M. Actually, that's the new quantum world that we're going into. It's a profound understanding that everything is energy. That there is, and that we're all connected by that same universal field of energy. So once you start having this understanding of togetherness, and oneness, and connectivity, everything changes.
Yeah. Listen, just to finish up, and you may have actually already covered this, but taking a step back from your role as a renegade pharmacist, and of course we're all on our own health journey, what do you think the biggest challenge is for people today on their health journey through life in our modern world?
The biggest challenge today, I call it, it's great, such a good question.
Thank you.
I call it FOFO, the fear of feeling out. I think this is the biggest epidemic spreading around the world today. It's actually something that started in the ancestral times. Okay, so imagine in the olden days, we're all in tribes. Okay, it's fear of feeling out, FOFO. Okay, back then, if you were excluded from the tribe, right, you were dead. You would not have any food. You'd have no supplies. You'd have no resources. You wouldn't pass on your genes. The only thing your reptilian brain, cares about is survival and reproduction. That's all it cares about, right? And that is where all the fear begins in your body. The fear of feeling out is the strongest fear of all. So what happens is we do a lot of things instinctively, habitually, to fit in to our environment. Now, if that environment doesn't serve you, if you're surrounded by people who go to the pub every night and drink loads of beer, smoke loads of cigarettes, it's pretty likely you're going to end up doing that and repeating those habits. And you're going to die younger than somebody who isn't exposed to that environment. So what you need to do is have a look at what are all of the things that you do to try and fit in to an environment, and whether that environment really is serving your best interests. And then the fear of actually moving out of that, is going to hopefully become less than the fear of fitting in to that society, because you'll start to wake up and realize that actually you are your environment. And that's it.
Niraj,
that's all we're going to overcome.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been terrific to talk to you. We'll have links to your webpage, of course, and they've got so many good resources on there. So again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ron.
You know, this idea of intentional stress is an interesting one. I'm often asked, is all stress bad? No, it's not. Intentional, beneficial stress, also called hormesis, is in that zone that the stress actually has a positive effect on health. Now, breath holding is a good example. Done properly, some very positive effects. Do it for too long and we call that suffocation. Not such a good thing. Exercise is another example, getting the balance right. That's good for your health, but too much and we start to cause damage. The same can be said about the use of heat, the use of cold, of fasting. All can be powerfully harnessed to improve health. And that's where putting the body under stress is within that hormetic zone, within that beneficial zone, is actually a good thing. Niraj has some very interesting resources on his website, which we will have links to. Now, if you're enjoying the podcast, jump onto iTunes and leave a review. And we might even put a link to that in the show notes just to make it a lot easier. It makes a very big difference to getting this message out. We've also got some great resources on my website, so have a look at that too. New ebooks, webinars, and even an online course. So until next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well. This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health, and related subjects. The content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she should consult with an appropriate